Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom adventure in real time. I'm your host, RJ Kerr, as always. And as I mentioned, we are in the process of building out a completely unique campaign with a completely original domain of dread. And today we're going to continue working on a portion of that we're calling the Sea Shanty Siren working title for that. And where we're going to continue building out our attitude tracking system for settlements and for individuals and what have you. But before we jump into that, let me give you a little bit of an update on what we've been doing so far, in case you haven't watched some of the previous live streams, and uh, or you haven't watched the previous recordings, and so you're all caught up. All right. So, like I said, we were creating completely custom campaign with unique domain of dread, and we've already done a lot of work on that. So we have figured out how our characters enter into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the blood moon. We have figured out what kind of motivations would draw them through that individually. We have figured out where they're going to land when they come through, and that would be in a shanty town that we're calling Darkport that sits on the edge of an inland sea. We've figured out that this inland sea is a huge part of this domain of dread, and that it was once the basin of a thriving metropolis that's now fallen to ruins, it become flooded. We have also figured out that the dread lord of this domain of dread is Ovander, an elemental evil that we're still kind of figuring out how he plays into this overall campaign. Uh, we have figured out the very first adventure, and that is where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors. And in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact that supposedly gives the wielder some power over the domain of dread. They realize that finding this artifact is going to become their best chance of escaping the domain with their lives. So now we're in the midst of working on a larger portion of the adventure where the characters get proactive and they've got lots of places they can go and explore and clues to find that can lead them along the path towards discovering this artifact. And so we're using a node structure style for this, where we've got different nodes or investigative scenes, as I like to call them, because that seems to kind of more fit a little more thematically. But within these investigative scenes, we litter a few clues, and the characters have the opportunity to find these clues and link and follow them to a different investigative scene, and follow that chain until they reach the location of the artifact. Now, this is a great structure because it gives our players a lot of agency, but it also gives us some, as DMs, some, well, frankly, some structure to write with, and so we're not having to run an adventure completely on the fly without being able to do any sort of advanced planning on that. And so we've done a bunch for that kind of thing, where we've created a five-room dungeon as one of our investigative scenes. We've created a heist-style adventure for one of our investigative scenes, and now we're working on what I call a complex social encounter. So effectively, we're doing an adventure that is really focused on NPC dynamics and interactions with the PCs as we go. So we're going to jump into that here real quick. But before we do, let me just remind everybody that this is an interactive channel. So please feel free to jump in the chat with your thoughts, opinions, ideas, questions, comments, concerns, anything else you want to talk about. And we'll get rocking and rolling. You guys come up with some amazing stuff every time that we do this. So I really appreciate your input. And let's see here. We've already got a couple. Looks like those are mostly highs and hellos in the chat at the moment here. And then we've got most recent one here from Fantasy Animal Vegan says, "Isn't complex social an oxymoron?" Depends on what social you're doing. I suppose complex social interactions, maybe not in humans, but in other species, I imagine. No, I'm kidding. All right, so let's go ahead and let me share my screen here, and let's get started. So um, last time we had finished up fleshing out some of the major NPCs that we knew we were going to have in this, our siren, and then the targets um, for her scheme to steal somebody's voice that she's thrusting on the player characters in exchange for the information that they're looking for. And so uh, the twist, of course, being that they have to give up their voice willingly. They can't be stolen. And so we've built out a whole bunch of information about each of these potential targets, including name, location, sort of the dilemma, why they might or might not want to give up their voice, and then their personal immediate objectives, their overall ambitions, their values, their core values, a secret. We've built in some clues, and any other information that might be relevant. So, like, we built a deity for the priest, that kind of deal. And we've given them descriptions too, so that we've got something to work with when we're role playing. So, um, we're probably not going to end up doing the sailor and the mayor, so we'll probably clean that up here in a bit. But let's leave them in space for the time being, just so that if we come up with some cool ideas, we can come back to them. And we were working on the complication and the twist for this adventure, right? Or this interaction, I should say, because we don't want it to come down to just a series of uninteresting die rolls, right? Where you're just rolling over and over and over again in terms of persuasion or intimidation or deception uh, to uh, to move this conversation forward and move this social encounter forward. Um, Instead, we want to make it a little more dynamic in as we go along. And one of the ways that we can do that here, and what we're focusing on at the moment, is what happens effectively if the characters fail to persuade one of these targets, one of the ones they approach. And we settled on the idea that NPC would start spreading word of this nefarious deal, and that would threaten to make the PC's prize and prevent them from making further deals unless they can silence an NPC. And so that meant that we had to come up with a system for tracking general attitudes. And this is uh, you know I lost my train of thought here for a second. And so yeah, so this is a mechanic that we're going to be able to extrapolate and use for a number of our settlements here. So we'll actually end up reorganizing this somewhere else in our document here, so it's easier to reference all the time. But we're just going to go ahead and keep building it out here for the moment, since we've gone ahead and got started. And so we came up with this 5-point scale system where when the party enters a new settlement, they start it with 3 points. It's kind of a neutral level. As they do hostile or negative things, they drop points. As they do benevolent or heroic things, they gain points. If they ever fall to a 1, they're effectively pariahs. And if they ever rise to a 5, they're local heroes. And so we've been. I think today it's time to start building out some of the boons and banes that they get at these different levels here as they work through. So we can capture ones that we've already kind of talked about. But real quick, we've got a couple more. We got one more comment in the chat here. Ben Elder says, I'm sorry, may the lady guide your steps. Common farewell for the Gray Lady's faithful. Yeah, could work. Could work. It's always cool to work in those little world details. It makes the place feel richer, feel more alive to your players. All right, so we're going to put in other boons and banes here, but we did mention that having 5 or 1 point, 5 points or 1 point, would have effects outside of the settlement as well. Let's see here. So let's say the attitude towards the characters increases by 1 point in neighboring settlements. Because we talked about that, and then we can say, for 1, the attitude towards the characters decreases by 1 point in neighboring settlements. So with the effect that if they really do something fantastic for one settlement, that word will spread of what they do, whether that's fantastically good or fantastically bad. Okay, so now we got to come up with some other boons and banes. We came up previously uh, with kind of some ideas for what might go into effect here, and that we could have some universal setbacks, and it's probably primarily what we're going to be working on here, and some things that uh, that change no matter what settlement you're in, and then some ideas for maybe some settlement specific setbacks, which we can build in here as well. As we're kind of building out our ideas of the new settlements that we kind of created out of the ether last time. And then we also talked about things like some harassment and childish pranks and stuff like that that goes on if they uh, if they're at certain levels here. And we had focused on sort of hostile, if they have a poor reputation in town. We also might come up with some other things that might happen if they have a good reputation in town. Instead of having rotten food thrown at them, maybe kids come up to them with necklaces of like flower necklaces or things like that. At certain levels. Um, uh, Fantasy Animal Levine says, "I'm gonna give. You're invited to the Lord and Our Lady's chambers and offered to wed their heir on a five." I mean, you absolutely could do that. It depends on the adventure that you want to run. I run some games where romance is totally cool. We run some games where we limit it to camaraderie. I have heard of some games that get really into the romance side. Yeah, those could absolutely be realistic boons. Is that a local person of influence wants to marry off their child to one of the adventurers. Um, Ben Elder says maybe they have advantage on persuasion deception rolls as long as it matches the hero ideal, e.g., the party need info about the priest because they're afraid someone is out to hurt him. Honest, yeah, okay, yeah. I like that. I think that we can make those sorts of things at a 5 and a 1 can make them kind of general, with advantage and disadvantage, pretty much whatever. Because if you're a local hero, you can come in and go, quick, I need 5 bags of flour. I have no time to explain. Give them to me, and you're less likely. Somebody's more likely to help you, right? And then look for an explanation later. Um, and whereas they're more likely to be suspicious of you overall if you're to 1. So let's put those in here. Let's say advantage on charisma checks to influence locals. And then we'll say disadvantage on charisma checks to influence locals. And this is the kind of thing too that we can step back a point, and we can say advantage on charisma checks to influence locals among. No, because they're already going to get advantage there. So let's say we're going to say during heroic acts. We'll keep that kind of loose. And then we'll say disadvantage on charisma checks to influence locals. Let's say instead of heroic acts, let's say during. We're going to say during action. Is what we're going to say here. I don't necessarily mean combat. I just mean like when things are going on and stuff's happening at pace. You're kind of in the heat of the moment. If people are more likely to be kind of, um, you know, look favorably upon you, their gut reaction is going to be to help you. If they're more likely to look disfavorably on you, their gut reaction is going to be to hinder you, or to the very minimum not help you. And so we can put a little bit there. I would say that this is the sort of wording that I wouldn't use if I was writing something that I was gonna then pass on to another DM to run. Um, uh, because it is a little bit nebulous in this term, we'd have to define what we mean by during action. But uh, again, the advantage and disadvantage thing is easy to kind of step up, which works well for our model here. Okay, so moving back to the chat, let's hear. Jonathan Frost says, "Gain a follower, a town fool who jeers and ridicules them as long as their reputation is less than 3." Um, yeah. Okay. So let's. I like the idea of a follower. Um, so let's say, because we could have um, positive followers and negative followers, right? So um, question is, where do we want to work those in? Let's say um, party gains a follower who exalts. Can never spell that right. There's no H. I always want to put an H in there. There's no H. Who exalts their deeds ever they are in town. Example, a local bard. And then we could say party gains a follower who jeers at them whenever they are in town. Example, town drunk or fool. Okay, and then again, that's something else we can kind of step down a little bit here, where we could say instead of them having consistent follower, they get small acts of kindness from children at 4 points. Party receives small acts of kindness from children, and the party receives small acts of harassment from children. Let's say, example, throwing rotten food. And here we'll say, example, gifted picked flowers. Okay. Let's see here. Back into the chat. You guys are coming up with stuff fast and furious here. So let's see here. Ben Elder says maybe for 4 they get a small discount or increase in price for goods, services. 5 is a further increase for things that are available that were not before. Yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe below 3 opens a criminal guild to the party. Yeah, that's an interesting idea to put some to have it primarily positive things that occur at the higher levels and primarily negative things that occur at the lower levels, but to maybe sprinkle in some disadvantage to being at a higher level and some disadvantages to being and some advantages to being at a lower level. Um, so yeah. We so like for example, maybe it's harder to hide if you're a local hero, right? Because everybody recognizes you, everybody knows who you are. Whereas if you're the local pariah, it's much easier to kind of access the black market and what exists in this world. That's a cool idea. We could definitely work on that. Um, um, let's Sorry. I just saw Mr. Max's comment here just below Ben Elders where he says, let's say hypothetically a group of adventurers save some people from, I don't know, a pit full of dinosaur turkeys, with the city be inclined to shower them with gifts, asking for a friend. That seems like a heroic act that might move you up a point. It could also be negated if anybody noticed that the party of adventurers also shoved some of those people into that said pit. Um, uh, Mr. Vex is referencing one of our Tomb and Violation games here. Um, let's see here. Anyway, continuing on, Ben continues on with I've heard you're not afraid to get your hands dirty with Thieves Guild kind of stuff. Yeah. Um, and yeah. Terrific. Yeah, so let's work on some of those. I think that's a cool idea to make there be some pros and cons to every aspect here. Um, so let's say disadvantage on. Um, I'm just gonna say stealth checks on this instead of dex stealth checks. Um, because I would apply it to other kinds of stealth checks too. And you might say, what other kinds of stealth checks are there? Aren't they all dex based? It depends on the circumstances. I've done performance based stealth checks to like hide in plain sight. So like charisma based stealth checks, I should say, to like hide in plain sight and things like that. Um, and so I would say this is disadvantage on stealth checks overall. Stealth checks to avoid being noticed or to avoid being recognized. And we'll say advantage on checks made to find underworld contacts. Cool. Yeah, and we definitely need to have some of the monetary advantages and disadvantages here that we've mentioned before. So we'll work those in as well. Um, but let's see what other kind of stuff we come up here. Let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan says it could be interesting at 5 to have a reward that could cause some tension, something they might not want and requires diplomacy to say no to. Like the party's invited to serve on a leadership council for the town. Hmm. It's an interesting idea. Not all of our towns have that kind of leadership in them. Like Darkport is run by gangs, um, but that could be something that we could use as settlement specific advantages or setbacks. Could be, because we could do that both ways. One, they could be invited to participate in local government, that kind of thing, in one of the setbacks. And then also, if they're high enough and they're low enough on that, they could have sort of received the personal ire of somebody in local government. So now, like, that person's going out of their way to make problems for this adventurer. Those pesky kids, that kind of thing. Yeah, we could do something like that. I know we're going to get rid of this section right here. We're going to eventually delete it, but it's where I'm kind of keeping my notes for this. So let's put that down so we don't lose that idea. Invited to participate in local government or become the focus of the local government's ire. Yeah, that's a good one. We see an example of that in Curse of Strahd, where there. I don't want to give anything away, but there are towns where the parties help sort of upsets the local government in a lot of ways, unless they take other certain actions where they can sort of make friends there. And so, yeah, it's a cool little mechanic to work in here. Again, it doesn't work for every settlement, but I think it's a good one that we can work into one of these for sure. Um, let's see here. Mr. X says, back to topic. If the group is popular and needs to lay low, could a theater group or someone that makes clothes help disguise the party or provide them with ways to disguise themselves? Yeah, absolutely, they could. That's not something that I would work into sort of the general benefits, but it's creative role play, the kind of thing that I would certainly reward as the characters are trying to overcome some of the disadvantages of being popular, as it were. Um, they get advantage on charisma checks, right? So they could certainly influence somebody to help them out. Um, all right. So before we get too far, sorry, we got one more comment here. Ben Elder says maybe a high rep could result in a long rest ambush. Adventurers are loaded, and criminals like loot just as much as adventurers do. Um, hmm. Yeah, I do love a good long rest ambush. Hmm. Let's put that into settlement specific setbacks too. Because that's cool. Because that's the kind of thing that, like, depending on your rep in Darkport, that can happen. Um, and yeah, okay. Let's see here. High rep puts party at risk of increased local crime. We'll say low rep. I can't believe I couldn't think of this word last time. Not attitude. Reputation is the word that I was searching for last time and just couldn't find in my brain. Puts the characters at lower risk of local crime. Cool. Okay. Yeah, because that's definitely something I could see going on in Darkport. Where it's run by gangs and things like that, where there is high risk of crime anyway, and that if you've got a low reputation, the idea might be that you're just not somebody that people want to mess with. But if you have a high reputation, hey, the risk is worth the reward. That could be worthwhile. People assume that you're rich. I like that. That's a cool one. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says the double-edged sword nature of this chart is very appropriate to the setting. It's not a nice place in general. Exactly. Should be pros and cons to everything that happens here. One of the things that I like about a dark setting is that good deeds really shine bright, and so having the ability to reward players that dig into that and do good deeds is a very cool thing. But also the ability to see what happens when people kind of lean into the nastiness of this location and what happens to them then. Yeah, so I mean for large sort of social dynamics, I really like using a reputation tracking kind of scale, as it were. Um, let's see here. We've got a lot in the 5-point and 1-point. We should build a little more out in 4 and 2 as we go. We got a couple other comments here. Let's see here. Mr. Mex says, or if they have low rep, can eventually unlock access to a shady person that is able to forge documents that are almost undetectable. Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to that advantage on checks to make underworld contacts. Absolutely. Um, let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, are there gods in their world? Does their level affect the god's attention, a cult's attention? Um, you could absolutely run it that way. Fantasy Animal Vegan. Um, the the if you were running a campaign where it had a high level of god of deity interactions, um, uh, so the if you were, I don't think it'd be appropriate to this particular setting, is what I'm trying to get at here. Is that I don't think in a domain of dread. I think this is in many ways, a quote unquote godforsaken place. But if you were running another kind of adventure using this mechanic, where you had a lot more interaction from deities or influence the world to some extent on that, then yes, I would be tracking reputation with deities as well, as they might represent the heads of key factions, that kind of thing. Because you could do this as more than just for settlements. You could assign this to every faction in the game if you really wanted to do that. Some ways that's more effective. It's also more work to do multiple iterations of this reputation tracker. It's a case where if for the uh, if I'm tracking a dozen different gods that we're trying to see if the characters are going to gain favor with or not, I might go back to that 3 point system as opposed to a 5 point system. Whereas if I'm tracking for a singular deity and nothing else, then maybe I might advance this to a 7 point system where I can get a little more granular. Um, there's pros and cons to both there. But yeah, you depending on the adventure you're running, you absolutely could do it for tracking favor of the deities. Um, Mr. Max says, "Sorry, high rep with the gang's not low rep." Yeah, I kind of get what you mean there, Mr. Max. So the way I'm conceptualizing this is the the way I'm conceptualizing how we're going to use this in this specific world is that this is sort of the reputation that you gain within settlements, right? So it's over a group of people that are mostly trying to survive and get by, and so as you gain points, you're getting increased reputation with the majority of people. But as you lose points, you're also gaining reputation with kind of the underworld, as it were. Um, and so again, coming back to that, there being some advantages to being on the low end of things here, and some advantages and some disadvantages to being on the high end of things. But if you wanted to again run this for every faction, you could strip out some of the rewards and some of the disadvantages we've put in here and attach it to every underworld faction that's in the game, every above board faction, all that kind of stuff, and um, and that would allow you to track in very great detail what the character's influence in any particular part of the adventure would be. I think I would only really lean into doing that if there is a really strong political element to a campaign, because it is a fair amount of tracking to kind of note that. And you're going to want to develop a spreadsheet for that kind of deal, or some other way to kind of track that information from session to session. Um, but if you've got a lot of political elements in your game, then it's incredibly useful to figure out kind of the sorts of challenges and advantages the characters would find as they explore the world. Jonathan Frost says it's a domain of dread at fantasy. Yeah, at Fantasy Animal Vegan, there are gods here. Don't know if the chances of attracting attention is. Yeah, I agree. But it's still, you could use that for other more quote unquote godly campaigns. Fantasy Animal Vegan says for 4 and 2, the townspeople bring rumors to the party, or false rumors, instead of searching them out. Um, hmm. Hmm. Interesting. there's an idea in there. Um, yeah, hmm. See, I think that's primarily, in the broad sense, covered by the. Don't want to drag that. The advantage on charisma checks or the disadvantage on charisma checks to influence locals during action, or here as well. But I kind of like the idea that they're going to be lied to more often if they're low. Um, then again, what if we flip that on its head and we say that people are more likely to exaggerate, to tell bigger stories to them if they're higher there, because they want to impress these local individuals who are gaining reputation in town. They want to be in with the popular kids, as it were. Um, and that they're more likely to get the nitty gritty, gory details uh, if they're uh, down at the lower levels here, where people are just kind of giving them the bare facts, or the people they're talking to want to sort of relish in the sort of the penny dreadful aspect of things that are going on. Yeah, I like that. Um, yeah. We're gonna say NPCs are more likely to exaggerate and grandize, grandize necessarily themselves. Come on. Their stories and rumors, trying to get the PC's attention. NPCs are more likely to give the PCs the bare facts without exaggeration, trying to avoid I'm going to say suffering their wrath, we'll say, but I don't know. That's the best way to describe it. But effectively, you know, on the high point here, they might kind of inflate and exaggerate in the hopes of kind of getting in with the cool kids, as it were. Whereas on the low end here, they might uh, be more likely to just give the bare facts without exaggeration, hoping that they don't get beat up by the bullies. That kind of deal. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Let's see here. Um, Ben Elder says perhaps for 2 and 4, townsfolk and guards will. Ooh, I didn't. Whatever. Didn't see the. Whatever else you typed after that didn't come through here, Ben, because the next messages maybe have a +5 or similar to interactions. Um, oh, I'm sorry. That is the continuation there. Maybe the head guards introduces themselves and says, "Is keeping an eye on the party for good or ill reasons." Um, yeah. Again, I think that works well if the uh, let's see here. Yeah, if that works well, if there's a town guard or that kind of thing, and there isn't in all of the towns that are in here, I'm sure there is in some of the towns. It would make sense to have some of that. So we might say under settlement specific setbacks, boons and banes with town watch. Yeah. And to that end, too, we could flip that on its head as well. And on places like Darkport that are run by gangs and that kind of deal, having a low rep might mean that you get more beneficial treatment from their kind of the thugs that act as the guards that back up that kind of run certain portions of that town. Uh, as if you got a if you got low points in your reputation score there, you're kind of a bad dude that they don't want to mess with overall. So kind of gives us the opportunity to kind of flip that on its head, and it's covered, I think, in a lot of ways by things like advantage on checks made to find underworld contacts, or disadvantage on charisma checks to influence locals. Um, but again, if we were going to be writing this for somebody else, if we were going to be trying to publish this, something like that, we'd want to put a little more detail in terms of what we mean by all of this. But for ourselves, this is enough, I think. Let's see here. Fantasy Animal Vegan says, Bearfax, there must be a clan in this world that are energy vampires who attack with vicious mockery, but they say a barrage of Bearfax. The mechanics could be called Bears Beat Bee. Appreciate the Office reference there. Cool. All right. We've been dancing around it for a little while here. We haven't done anything with it yet. We need to work it in, and that's discounts. So you can go two ways with doing discounts for merchants. And that's you can do a straight, you get a 10% discount at 4 points, you get a 15% discount at 5 points, or a 5% discount at 4 points and 10% at 5 points, or something along those lines. And then, do the prices are higher as you go lower levels and that kind of deal. You can absolutely do that. It's pretty straightforward mechanically. It requires a little more math to do that, and you do end up dealing with fractions and things like that periodically, which is not necessarily a hard thing to do, but sometimes players and games struggle with that. But you could also do this in a way that it's more of a Orth, you are a step ahead of me here, my friend. Where you said, Orth says, I'd say you get a +1 or 2 or a -1 or -2 or something to haggle for prices makes it a bit simpler. Yeah, it's kind of where I'm getting at here, is that I think that we give some kind of boon to haggling for prices. Or advantage on the kinds of checks that would be used. Because, for example, I could see that, if you're trying to negotiate with like persuasion check or a deception check, and you're a 5, people are going to be more likely to believe you and accommodate. And, oh yeah, okay, I can do that special price for you, that kind of deal. But by the same token, if you're at a 1 and you are trying to intimidate a shopkeeper, maybe you're trying to shake them down, you might have advantage on that because you got a nasty reputation in town. You're a bad dude. Maybe they don't want that kind of trouble. So maybe we change this here and we say advantage on see, I always lean into advantage disadvantage because I think it's easier. But if you're kind of going with the 5, something, I think it's a relic of having played a lot of 3.5, where there's a lot of, +2, +5, that kind of stuff into these rolls here that added to the math. And so I just reflexively try to kind of stay away from that. But it doesn't mean it's bad in all circumstances. So maybe we adjust this. Maybe we say, at 5 points, it's a +5 to charisma persuasion or deception is to influence locals. And we're going to copy that. We're going to change this here, and instead it's going to be a +2 at, at 4 points there. Why +2 and jumps to +5, you say? Well, I'm following the same pattern that they use for partial cover, where if you've got half cover, it's a +2 to your AC. If you've got 3/4 cover, it's a +5 to your AC. And so there's a number of sort of mechanics like that in the game that jump there. And so those seem to be pretty good numbers that work. I'll be honest, I haven't really run the math statistically on that for you, but they give you mathematically a decent enough boon or bane that makes a difference here. So that's where I'm pulling those numbers out from. So I want to do something. So we're going to do something that's kind of similar down here, but we're going to make some differences. We're going to say -2, and then we're going to say -5. And then what I would like to do is do the inverse for intimidation checks, right? And so, because if you're one of the local heroes and you like try to intimidate somebody, I kind of feel like they're almost going to take that as like jest, like you wouldn't hurt us, you're goofing off here, come on. Whereas if you're like one of the pariahs and you threaten to do that, they could take you seriously. So it's tricky because you could go either kind of way with it, but I think that as long as we're trying to codify this mechanically, I think we're going to do something along that line. So intimidation checks, and make that a -5. Copy that bad boy, and let's add that in here. Because people think you're more of a known quantity in some cases here. It's 5. Okay. Cool. Adds to some of our boons and banes, making this all kind of a double-edged sword in a lot of places here. Let's see. Something that jumps out at me here is we started with a 3-point where we say residents start indifferent to the PCs. We should probably codify that as well, that the residents start friendly to the PCs at these other points here, and hostile down here. And we just mean, we've been saying locals instead of residents. Let's change that terminology here. And these are, keep in mind, these are general rules. There are individuals that are always going to kind of flout this within a particular settlement. So let's toss that in here. Let's say locals start as friendly to the PCs. Okay. Okay. It's probably redundant in some ways here, but I'm second guessing myself on whether or not we want to codify that, because we were already kind of playing around with some of the DCs here normally, and hostile versus, indifferent versus friendly is going to change some of the DCs. Actually, I think in 2024 rules, it just adds advantage and disadvantage to these sorts of things. We're already given pluses and negatives here. So maybe we want to strip that out. Let me think about that for a second. In the meantime, let's go back to the chat. Jonathan Frost says, "Oh man, social combat. Yeah, man, you absolutely can run this sort of stuff as social combat, and it can be a lot of fun. It can give you a lot of dynamics. Have sort of almost that rapier like wit and sort of conversations, and really making this a far more dynamic kind of encounters here." When they want to do very basic things like haggle or intimidate or try to get rumors out of people or that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Ben Elder says we could say at one point most respected traders flat out will not serve you. Yeah, and vice versa for 5. The thugs and criminals lock up shop at the sight of you. Yeah, we could do that. That's pretty good. Yeah, let's say Underworld will not deal with you. And we'll say, we should probably say instead of you, we should say with PCs. All right, then we can say respected merchants will not deal with PCs. Cool. All right. Cool. I like that. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says yokels, not locals. Depends on the settlement, man. It depends on the settlement. Let's see here. Orth says they're all peasants and bow to their 5-point lord. I mean, to some extent, yeah, that might be how it plays out in some of these. Let's see. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, and frankly, we've got a lot of stuff on this list here, which I'm kind of tempted to cap it off at this point. In fact, the more I think about it, yeah, we're going to get rid of the definitions of friendly and hostile because we've already played around with the DCs with the +2s and the +5s and so on and so forth. We don't need to further complicate that with advantage or disadvantage overall. But this is a lot, and this is a fair amount to manage anytime you're within a particular setting here. So I think this is worth kind of putting a cap on it here. We can always modulate this as we go, and we're going to want to come up with more settlement specific feedback or setbacks as well as we do this. And that we might build as we build out some of these other towns. Because we really just kind of pulled names out of the ether last time and stuck them in places. Let's see here. Ben Elder says the social combat thing, the barkeep, I give you sass roll initiative. I mean, you know what? But you absolutely could, though, run a social encounter where you have everybody roll initiative, and it's about getting a word in edgewise, right? It's about it's make that a really dynamic sort of social thing, and as opposed to people attacking, you're making checks for deception and persuasion, and you're making the players say quick things as opposed to big long monologues, and really kind of getting into that sort of I imagine it's the way I envision that sort of thing happening going down is it's like if you've ever seen shows where it's the small town commoner or whatever is now for whatever reason thrust into the local nobles ball, and they're having to like interact with people, and they're getting made fun of the whole time, and everybody's like cutting in with these little comments, and they're trying to get a word in edgewise to defend themselves or redeem themselves or like kind of get above all of this commentary. I could see you doing that in initiative order, and trying to really have that like almost that sense of competition, much in the way that you would almost run like a chase scene, right? Which we do in initiative order as well. And just using social encounter style checks for that kind of thing. There's that could be a really interesting way to encapsulate a really rapid fire kind of conversation with a lot of cutting wit in there. Um, the let's see here. Mr. Mex says, "Are there ways to get better checks if intoxicated?" Um, those are situational. Those are situational. I have been known to let specifically monks who are way of the drunken master uh, get better at things when they're drunk. Um, um, but it's situational. Orth says, rolling for how effective my Yo Mama joke was to the barkeep. Sounds, yeah, I mean, you absolutely could do it that way. If you were really trying to like, have this competition of witty repartee, you could run it almost like a chase with a complication table and all that kind of stuff. Instead of going anywhere physically, the conversation has to get to a certain point where either, win or you get or you lose. You could make it a competition that way in certain interactions. Mr. Mick says, okay, oh man, the game of dozens of the game of the dozens going off in a tavern would be hilarious. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Fantasy Animal Vegan talking about tipping the bartender for the sassy friend over there. And please do not make me improvise a rap battle in one of our games tomorrow, Fantasy Animal Vegan. Please do not do that to me. Okay. Ben Elder says, roll your d20 and times result by charisma modifier, and that is their social hit points or battery. Every dad joke or uncouth manner deals social damage. 0 means they must leave. You absolutely could do that. I would almost think of it again more like a chase kind of thing, where it's like you're trying to get to a certain point, and maybe every roll of the die, every success advances you so far along the conversation ladder, as you will, and that you roll a d20, or at the end of everybody's turn to come up with whatever the setback is that affects the next person potentially. Somebody drunkenly stumbles in the conversation, somebody drops a tray of drinks, somebody what have you. Um, uh, Or it says, imagine failing all your checks in the social combats, and now your PC has negative because of it. Yeah, right. Like you just embarrass yourself so badly in the conversations with all the other NPCs that like they that now like you can't show your face anywhere without like ridicule. Like, I mean, I feel like that's like I feel like running it that way would almost be the like the in-game equivalent to like you sit down at the table and tuck the tablecloth into your shirt as the napkin. You stand up and rip everybody's drinks up, everybody's food off the table. Like that's the sort of thing that would happen if you ended up like failing all of your checks, like something ridiculous like that. That would be a lot of fun. I kind of want to run a social encounter that way now. Maybe we'll come up with mechanics to do that in one of these sessions. Yeah, that could be fun. That could be fun. Uh, let's see here. Mr. Max Crust goes to start a rap battle, and all of a sudden we're all just tossed out by everyone else. Yes. Again, referencing one of tomorrow's games. Please, I must reiterate, do not make me improvise a rap battle. Don't do it to me. Please don't. Um, All right. Fantastic. So I think that we are pretty much at our time here, and we've done a good job building this out. Pretty excited about what we've kind of got here. And again, we can apply this to a lot of areas of the adventure here. So this is a lot of really useful stuff um, that we can use to create a very dynamic sort of world here. Um, it to me says we're probably going to want more settlements than just what we've got here. We're probably going to want a larger network of them, and maybe we lean into the these are the towns, and then we have some hamlets and things like that, and some villages, and we kind of change up the scale and those sorts of things. But we put those on the map as well, fleshing this out to make this more of a more important in a lot of ways. Really giving our characters the opportunity to shine. Um, uh, all right. So uh, let's go ahead and wrap up here. Let's put a pin in it. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you have enjoyed this live stream or you are enjoying the recording of it later, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow, helps more people find us, and helps keep these chats nice and dynamic. As we saw that they were this evening here. You guys always come up with some really cool stuff, and we have a good time chatting with you. So I really appreciate that. If you ever want to jump into one of my tables, you can check out my open games at the moment at startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr. I also have space for custom stuff. So if you are looking for something that's not there, or you're looking for a different time, or you're looking for a one shot, or all that kind of stuff, you can request a session on there as well, and we can figure out how to accommodate your needs at a time and place that works for you. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me again tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again on Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon.